Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar titled AR and Treasury, Developing a Feedback Loop for Effectiveness. This is Brian from Strategic Treasurer, and we're pleased you could join us as we explore how AR and Treasury can work together to achieve greater organizational effectiveness. Our speakers for today are Jason Murante, Business Development Invoice to Cash Application at Esker, and Craig Jeffery, Founder and Managing Partner of Strategic Treasurer. Welcome, Jason and Craig, and I now turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Brian. And Jason, it's good to present with you. This is the first time we presented with you for Esker, and glad to have you on board.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, my pleasure. And everyone, thank you for taking time out of your day. As Brian had mentioned, you have a lot of things to do. And so we appreciate you spending a half hour with us talking about this feedback loop and effectiveness and this idea of communication. Very important items to bear in mind, whether you're in AR, whether you're in Treasury, or just in broader finance. Well, let's get into it. Our agenda today is shown with the 4 rectangles on the screen. We're going to cover information about the cash conversion cycle. This is the interaction between AR and Treasury. It also includes accounts payable and, of course, inventory as well for those organizations that have inventory. So we'll discuss the loop, the cycle. And because there's a cycle, that is a key area where there's interactions. We'll look at the differing concerns of AR and Treasury. This is where you can have organizations focus on one aspect or another. There can be different drivers, different motivators. There can even be KPIs that are quite different one to another. And this can create competing KPIs, competing objectives, and can create a challenge for the other party. And so we move on to the third section. We'll talk about synergy. And this is a feedback loop for effectiveness, or a method of ensuring there's effective communication and overall organizational goals are kept in mind by those in the Treasury group and those in the AR group or the credit group, et cetera. So this will be, how do we work together for greater success? And finally, as is our tradition, we have some key takeaways and final thoughts. What are some of the summary actions or key thoughts to bring back to your organization? So we've got a lot of information to cover. Jason and I are excited. We have we'll get us started into the content now. We'll begin with the cash conversion cycle. So the cash conversion cycle, you can see the blue to green. The cycle of accounts receivable is somebody ships stuff or somebody delivers stuff, then there's billing, and there's the whole collection process all the way till funds are applied, turning and making Treasury happy because funds come in. Then on the payable side, there's certainly order and activities that push activity out the door and create a need to pay cash. And so the cycle is one element of how efficient an organization runs, how quickly it can put cash into a cycle and take it out on the receivable side or on the inventory side, and the same thing on the payable side. So this idea of the interchange between these shows that they're connected one to another, like part of a circular stream or an interconnected network. Jason, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything here, particularly on the AR side, or we should.
Yeah, it did. So, for AR, it's all about speed and efficiency, right? Part of AR is, sending out the invoices, and then of course collections kicks in to collect the funds, and the funds come back. So payments come back, and the goal is to apply those payments as quickly as possible. So speed, and then accuracy too, right? Which mitigates risk to not misapply payments. The quicker you can get the cash in the door, and then also apply to the open AR items in your backend system, the better. And that actually will have some downstream positive effects on customer service, DSO, employee retention and morale. So I want to point that out too.
Yeah, those are some really good points, Jason. And the differences in the areas of overlap. We'll cover some of those, and we'll begin with that here on this chart. We have a DSO view and a liquidity view. I'll start on the liquidity view side, and then Jason, let you jump in on the DSO, then we can dialogue about it. So the liquidity view from a treasury perspective is, do we have enough cash at all times during the month. And so this chart is a stylized graph of maybe there's due dates around the 5th of the month. And so or, a lot of items ship out and the receivables are quite high around the 5th of the month. Maybe they're peaking by the end, and then perhaps there's incentives to collect money towards the end of the month. But Treasury doesn't just care about the average, they care about the peak. So they need to hit in this case, the $15 million receivable flow. So DSO is a measure of efficiency. Treasury cares about, what do I need for liquidity? I can't just say, I'll take an average for the month. Banks tend to make sure you have enough money in your accounts before they'll release funds. And so there's an element of liquidity view has to be every day and on average, especially as we look on the short term. And the DSO view has different drivers. So I have to have enough funds to cover all of my activity during the month, and DSO view has some additional drivers for what matters on the AR side.
Yeah, good point, Craig. So, collections and those collection activities, your teams out there are the tip of the spear as far as getting money back in, right, to have an effect on DSO. So, any AI-based collections tool can be really helpful to provide some priority work lists for your collectors, to target the folks that, traditionally do pay late, to provide sort of an automated dunning process also helps with that piece. So cash application, last but not least, same thing, right? $1 million check hits your bank, can't really do anything with it. Treasurer can't invest it. CFO can't invest it till it's applied to your open AR, right? Your open invoices. So there's all kinds of tools that can help with that as well.
Yeah, the phrase, dialing for dollars towards the end of the month to get the funds in,
Yep.
is really key. And so how many people can you call? How do you move those along? Your idea of, prioritizing those, leveraging tech to do that matters greatly. Excellent point. So this brings us to our first poll question. So we'll pop that up on the screen. And there are two embedded poll questions within this choice. So the first one, hopefully you can find it. There's some instructions in the chat box how to locate it if it's not showing up on your screen. The first question is, how would you describe your cash flow from accounts receivable activities? There's, it's cyclical on an annual basis. There's a monthly cycle, maybe, peaks mid-month, end month. It's consistent pretty much week to week, but maybe there's some, other elements that go on. It varies based upon projects or events, or I'm unsure, or maybe you have so many different cash flows on the AR side that there's differences. On the second question is, do Treasury and AR have a regular meeting cadence? Do they get together and talk? If our topic today is AR and Treasury developing a feedback loop for effectiveness, how is that feedback loop working? There can be data, there can be information that's shared in reports, but how is that working in terms of sharing activity? So give everybody a chance to respond to that. While you're doing that, in the chat box, you can see a link to follow Esker on LinkedIn. Please, as soon as you've submitted your poll responses, click on that, follow Esker. They provide a lot of good information on LinkedIn. It's just a way to get feeds when you go into LinkedIn to see what's going on, interesting news items. And also encourage you to do the same with Strategic Treasurer. Just make sure you're following, that'd be awesome. So we are, I see that Nancy is already after things. We're going to go 75 people typing the word Esker, the company name Esker, or poll in the chat box. Then we'll share all the poll results on from these slides with you after the event. So 75, and it's December, so it'd be a nice present if I don't have to keep saying it every time we come to a poll box. We just want to see that engagement and know that people love data like we do. So Jason, as we look at this, pretty big mix. There's monthly cycle dominates an annual cycle or some other cycle. And then there's some that are project-based and varying. I don't know if there's any comments on that. Maybe the focus is, there's a lot of differences there. But the second question is, do Treasury and AR have a regular meeting cadence? 35% say no. A little over 50% are quarterly or other, no quarterly or other. That actually seems pretty good from what I see. So I don't know if we have a bias from who's listening about effectiveness. It's definitely a lot of room for improvement because a third don't have any. Yeah, so excellent. Thanks for taking the survey or the poll, and we'll continue our discussion. So um, Treasury and AR. I'll start with Treasury, of course, and then what are some of the distinct concerns? I highlighted a few of those with that chart of uneven flow. As a treasurer, daily cash and liquidity is vital. You have to have money to cover it at every point. You have to cover the low spots in cash. You can't go negative, so that matters. DSO is also a concern. Why is that a concern for the treasury? The days sales outstanding, because it's a measure of efficiency, which speaks to scalability. Treasury cares about the organization's scalability. They have to provide a balance sheet that works into the future, the next year, 2 years, 3 years, while they also may be looking at short-term cash liquidity in a 1, 3, 6-month cycle or within a year. So DSO matters the farther they look out to address those needs. And so a couple of views they have are there's a more detailed view for the forecast, oftentimes 6 months, sometimes as much as a year. And then as you look out farther, what does the balance sheet need to look like to support the business? Keeping day sales outstanding down. This is usually a key measurement that AR has is your day sales outstanding or some of the averages that exist there. Keeping that down, it shows the ability to collect and be effective in that. Okay, so so keeping DSO down is key and critical. The idea of not going beyond the credit extension that's necessary. So if there's new goods or new services that need to be released, that they can be released quickly as they go on. Sales cares about that. That's a way of generating margin, doing that quickly. And one of the views is it's different in AR. It tends to be what's the snapshot of the beginning and end of the month. Those are some of the measurements used for determining day sales outstanding. And so this helps that process. It tends to be, let's look at an average from the end of the month. Those tend to be the more commonly used terms, and how AR tends to be rated, because if they're collecting effectively, they're pulling in money, particularly at the end of the month when the financial statements hit, and that tends to be the most scrutinized time. But those are both areas that link together between Treasury and AR. Jason, is your audio working? You're
Sorry about
back.
that. Yeah, my
Excellent.
audio did cut out there. I apologize. I did want to say something on the poll results too, very quickly, regarding the percentage of folks that have sort of more of a seasonal business, right, where there's ebbs and flows in terms of cash flow. That's pretty consistent with what I've seen. And then also, in terms of the connection or the meetings that happen between Treasury and AR, I would say 15 years ago it was more prevalent than it is today. So I thought that was an interesting statistic as well. And I also want to make one point on AR in general, in terms of the complexity of the payments that companies get these days. It used to be that there was just checks and maybe ACH with an electronic remittance. And now you're seeing email remits that come day of, day after, day, 4 after you receive the payment. You're receiving more V cards these days. So there's a lot more ways your customers are paying you. So that makes it more difficult in terms of that speed element that I talked about to get your cash applied. So it's recognizable by your CFO and by Treasury, right? So that's an important consideration when it comes to DSO. So it's not as straightforward as it was 15 years ago as far as how you're paid. So that actually adds time to how quickly you can get your cash applied, and therefore start having a positive effect on, getting those numbers down.
Excellent. So I covered the AR portion as best I could.
Yep.
Now we're back on working together. I'll start with Treasury. So, what does Treasury need to do to assist AR in meeting the organizational goals or Treasury's goals? This idea of providing feedback to AR on the needs for collection, the requirements for accuracy and speed to make sure that accuracy of the forecast, for example. Treasury also must not ignore AR operations. It's not just overhead. This is understanding that what AR does impacts Treasury and the overall organizational effectiveness. And they are providers of services. They work on relationships with banks and third parties. This can provide services, functions, features that help AR do their job more effectively, be able to scale, to do that in a secure manner. And so, helping AR operations addresses and must address both liquidity concerns, getting money in available funds quickly, as well as the efficiency and the ability to scale. Every organization wants to grow and has to do so efficiently. And so these are some things that Treasury wants to should provide to AR, either in terms of information or support on the relationship side. How about the AR side, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the folks on the call have been to some recent trade shows and been on some other webinars. The big buzzword or big buzz term is the artificial intelligence these days, right? So our AI has been around for a lot of years. Companies have been talking about AI 15, 20 years ago, but it's modernized now, right? And actually does have a material effect, especially when it comes to forecasting, right? So you can employ systems that have AI and ML based forecasting mechanisms, like even in an AR tool where it can do collections forecasting based on the behaviors of your customers historically, right? And I know there's a lot of capabilities on the Treasury side for the same thing. It's very difficult to do cash forecasting as far as using tools. It's all about accuracy, right? How much onus are you going to put on those forecasts? So yeah, that's what my point is. Software has come a long way when it comes to AI that can really help with this piece.
Your point's really good on that. Mobile phones have been around, 30 years or so, and they're just, they're mobile phones. You can talk on them, but what can be done is so different, and the power of some of the tech is, what can be delivered on your phone is significantly different. Same thing with AI on the collection side. Well, excellent points. So, audience, let's hear from you again. We've got another poll question. Does Treasury and AR have any combined KPIs in your organization? Key performance indicators. Do you have any common goals? Obviously, you're going to have some separate goals, but does Treasury and AR in your organization have any combined KPIs or the same KPIs that they're both trying to hit? Really interested to see how that goes. So go ahead and select it and then submit it. There's in the chat box, there's some information about the following Esker and Strategic Treasurer if you haven't done that. And I think we need 11. We need 11 more people in the chat box just to type Esker or poll if you prefer. And then we'll provide all this good data back to you. We appreciate your prompt responses on these polls. 30 minutes is a bit of a sprint, a lot of good information, a lot of good dialogue. Thanks for taking the time. And we're definitely over the top if we add up everything that's coming through the different channels like Q&A and questions like that. So, Jason, this is almost 40% have combined KPIs. To be honest, I would have thought this would have been under 20%, maybe 25%, given the topic. This seems pretty encouraging.
Yeah, very healthy, very encouraging. I like it, and that kind of goes along with, sort of the communication that Treasury has with AR these days. So yeah, that's interesting.
That's fantastic. So everybody on here, if you're in the unsure, don't feel so bad, but continue to push to have combined KPIs. I think this is really where you can help the organization meet all those objectives. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for your response there. We're over the top for the Esker in the chat box, so we will share the information. We've got a few things to talk about here on the comprehensive KPIs, or KPIs that address the organization's needs, the key performance indicators. I think a couple of these, why does it make sense to have them? If you look on the lower left, I would bring up the point that one of my favorite quotes is optimizing part of the process sub-optimizes the entire process or the whole process. This is attributed to dozens of people and to anonymous. If you're only focused on Treasury, AR, or AP, or if you're focused on AR only within your organization as opposed to looking at the other party's process, it'll be impossible to optimize it for efficiency, optimize it for cash flow, because you're limiting your view. So if you optimize part of it, you're going to overlook and create inefficiencies across the board. On the KPI side and the view side, if we look at the upper right-hand side, Treasury is a source or sourcing provider for services from banks and fintechs. Treasury needs to be a business partner, not just a vendor, but as part of a strategic business partner, they also tap into capital for the organization and have relationships with banks who allow them to leverage their balance sheet. This is crucial for an organization's ability to grow. And as part of that, they also drive and push business into banks and fintechs that are oftentimes delivered through banks. This is a way of looking at the entire process. And so when we think about KPIs and across the board, those are pretty vital. Before I keep talking about this, Jason, I want to let you jump in. I've got more things to say on those, but go ahead.
So the top left where it says efficiency for cash. So I always correlate efficiency with profitability, right? So reducing the effort it takes to collect your money and apply your cash. That's super important, right? And so I talk about that quite a bit. It's beyond just your DSO. It's beyond just, customer satisfaction and improper credit holds and so on. It's reducing the effort it takes internally, not only to implement a solution, but also in general, right? Whether you have any kind of technology or not, to try to find ways to reduce costs internally, right, to complete these exercises. And that includes treasury management as well. So at the bottom right, where it says partnering, partnering with fintech companies, look, there's a lot of options out there, but really the main KPIs for me that I share with my clients is let's try to find a more efficient way to do A, B, and C, right? And mitigate risk or reduce risk in these processes, and try to get your cash in-house and applied faster. So that definitely resonates in the market quite a bit as far as the things that my clients look at as priorities.
And that keeps Treasury people pretty happy too. Get cash in faster, be efficient, scalable. Those all align. So there's certainly more we could talk about on this slide, but time is not our friend. There's a clock keeps moving forward. And we have a few things to cover. So how do you proceed? How do we go forward? Jason, I'll let you take the first couple and I'll wrap up with the final two.
Yeah, 15 years ago, I think AR and Treasury was probably more connected than it is today. I think we need to go back to that. I think there's so much value in having that connectivity between AR and Treasury. AR and AP used to be under Treasury for the most part back in the day. Now it seems to be more under finance. And I think reconnecting the two is super important, right? And then the piece about the roles and the communication, super important. The common KPIs that Craig pointed out. And then the communication internally, right? Like having those regular communicative meetings where both sides can sit down and one is feeding the other and vice versa. Super important to keep an open channel communication between those two groups.
Yeah, on the KPI side, I know we just talked about it, but a few moments ago, having common overall goals matters, and then down from those overall organizational goals, having the different key performance indicators or metrics that are going to be used to drive performance that benefits liquidity and efficiency. So DSO, liquidity, overall efficiency within AR, and then the cash conversion cycle efficiency for the organization's overall ability to put cash into the business and take it out. And on the alignment issue, again, this is the same scenario as before. We want to have our liquidity goals and perspectives aligned. There's similar native perspectives on that, collecting at the end of the month and making sure there's liquidity, but making sure the liquidity goals and collection activities align. And that's done through KPIs, understanding, and regular meetings to understand what's occurring, not viewing other areas as an island unto themselves, but part of the cash conversion cycle. And alignment on process efficiency. It's not just about collecting dollars, collecting funds. It has to be scalable and done in an efficient manner, as Jason had said. That's the only way an organization scale, and it's part of our stewardship responsibility on the AR side to do that efficiently just like the stewardship responsibility on managing cash on the Treasury side. So these are some of the key areas about a feedback loop for effectiveness, communication for effectiveness. Jason, I want to thank you for your time, and everyone else, thank you for joining. And Brian has a few additional items to cover.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Jason. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. The CTP credits, today's webinar slides, and a recording of today's webinar will be sent to you within 5 business days. And for more on working capital and thriving in uncertain times, be sure to listen to the Treasury Update Podcast, episode 250 with Esker by clicking the link in the chat box. Thank you, and we hope you have a good rest of the day.